Hello again and welcome to episode 4 of The Tyre Kickers, the classic car podcast that scours the classifieds for the roadsters, the coupes, the saloons of your dreams. My name is Matt.
And I'm Max. Welcome if you smell of T-Cut and have the AA on speed dial.
Coming up in this episode, would you vote to crush or caress the Triumph that beat the Germans at their own game, the Dolomite Sprint?
And while the sun still isn't shining, what will be the best roadster to buy to deliver that great British summer staple of a bright red forehead and frozen feet?
So open the garage door, peel back the dust cover, and let's fire up episode 4 of The Tyre Kickers.
So here we are again, back and ready to kick the tyres on all things classic cars. Now, thanks as always for your positive comments about episode 3. As we try and grow this podcast, your support and reaction to stuff is really greatly appreciated.
Yes, so here are a couple of honourable mentions to those of you who've got in touch. First up, Andy G, who's messaged about the TR7 Crush It or Caress It slot we did way back in episode 1. That seems quite a while ago now. He says, nice job, and for me, it's definitely a caress for the TR7. Although the convertible is much better looking than the coupe. I'd agree with that. And with the addition of the 3.5 V8, it became an amazing car as the TR8, or he says, converted TR7. Thank you, Andy, for that comment. He's agreeing with you, Max.
Well, that's because I'm right. Also, Chris B left a note on Facebook to say, really enjoying the podcasts, like the relaxed conversation with the car details, and a splash of humour. I like splash of humour, like a hint or a potpourri of humour.
It's like an eau de toilette of humour, isn't it? It's not a cologne. It's not strong enough to be a strong humour thing. It's just a little soupçon of it. Yeah, I'm not quite sure whether he's being sarcastic there, but thank you anyway, Chris, for getting in touch. Keep those comments coming. Stick them on one of our posts on Instagram. That's the best way for us to see them. We are at The Tyre Kickers UK.
So here's a question. With an internet packed full of classifieds, do you buy from a classic car dealer, or do you rock up outside someone's bungalow and buy a car from their driveway?
So what we're saying here is it better to pay a dealer premium and get your new pride and joy from a professional, or get a better deal and possibly a more honest car from the current owner? Is the showroom safer, or would you be checking the driveway for those telltale oil stains? What do you think, Max?
Well, it's interesting because I've bought a bag of spanners from a dealer, and I've also bought a bag of spanners from a private seller. So bags of spanners are out there. It's just you decide which one you want. I think, to be honest, I'm a specialist person in that I like the idea of a specialist, because if they're dealing in one mark or one model, you kind of know if they've been in business for a while, they'd be out of business if they were rubbish. So I do like that. I'm always a bit sniffy, to be honest, about generalists, the people who stock everything, because you don't really know that much about those things. And I went to see a garage which had a BMW, an E30 325i, and he just knew nothing about it. And I think if I go to a dealership, I want somebody to know more than I do about a car.
I get your point. I think if you are dealing and you are a decent dealer, then you'll have got that experience. You'll be buying a car with the right eyes. You'll be looking for the right signs, and you may have prepped it for sale and put some work in. So I think there are different type of dealers, and it depends what price range you're going at. The pros, I suppose, with a dealer is that you're going to get some expertise. They've got a reputation to keep up, and you've got some sort of comeback, which is quite important with a classic car, because it will go wrong. Something will be wrong with that car. I mean, you're not buying a new car here. It will have faults. As we all know as classic car owners, you have a list of the stuff that's gone wrong, and you sort of anticipate the stuff that may go wrong. So there's a little bit of that. So the comeback thing is quite important, which you don't get from buying off the driveway.
And I do like the idea with a specialist who has a mechanic in the back room, is when something goes wrong, you can take it back, and they've probably seen the problem already. So that's my specialist thing. I've got a specialist who looks after my Porsche 912, who's also called Max. And he's just amazing. He knows virtually every 912 in the country. So when you see one advertised, I pop down there for a chat and say, what do you think about that one? He said, oh, that's two 912s welded together. So you do get that kind of support from somebody who knows the car inside out, which you don't get from the generalists.
That, though, does come at a price, which brings us round to the buying it from a driveway. You're going to get a better deal from a driveway, although the flip of that is that sometimes private owners think that their stuff is worth more than it is on the market, and the market does shift, doesn't it? But the thing I like about the idea of buying from the person who had the car last, because you can sort of suss them out and suss out more about the history of the car and whether it's been used or not. Because when you pick it up from a dealer, it says, "Oh, the last owner owned it for 20 years, and this was their car, and they've done all this on it." What you're not maybe finding out is that the last 4 or 5 years it hasn't been used. So when you start that car up, and I've had this with a classic car, when you start that car up that's been laid up for a little while, the oil starts spurting out like some sort of water feature, but with oil, because all the gaskets have seized up, or the rubber's seized up, or it just hasn't been used. Old cars like being used. So it gives you that chance to suss out whether a car has been loved and enjoyed. I think the other thing as well with a car that's worth bearing in mind with a classic car is owners. People always, I hear people say this a lot. How many owners has it had? How many owners has it had? Well, actually, that's not necessarily a number that's good or bad. In new cars, I'd say that's more of you want a low number. You want a car that's been had a 1 owner or 2 owner or something. With a classic car, I think more owners is not necessarily a bad thing, because if you think about it, every time it goes into the new hands of someone who's passionate about it, they usually do stuff with it. Whereas maybe if you've had a car for 10 years or 15 years, you might have fallen out of love with it. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I do think it's quite interesting to see how well people look after their cars, because you're right, people get bored after 2 or 3 years and then just want shot of it. And I think that's probably not the car to buy. I think when you're buying privately, you can usually tell, to be honest, whether people have looked after the car or not. And I think it's always the great giveaway, are the tyres decent? Because if you're spending money on tyres, then you're probably spending money on the rest of it. The problem with buying privately is that people are quite emotionally invested in their cars. And like a dealer, you can turn up and say, "Oh, that's rubbish, I'll only give you X for it." If you do that to a private seller, they get a little bit offended. And I have had a couple of times when I've bought or tried to buy cars off people privately, and they've got quite uppity. And then also, they won't take an offer. So it's a lot more delicate, I think. When you go into a dealer's, you know it's going to be a transaction, there's going to be some to and fro. When you buy something privately, it's a little bit more subtle.
There's for and against them both. The dealer's got pros to it. They've also got cons to it. The private sale's got pros to it. As you say, you can look at the oil drips in the driveway. You can get to meet the owner. You can get the sense of whether they're into that car or they've just had it and got bored with it. But you also need to be very, very buyer beware.
I talked to a Rolls-Royce dealer once, and he said, "Okay, come down and see it. By the way, do you want the coordinates for the helipad?" No, thanks.
Okay, all this chat of buying cars has made me think, Max, that we need a fix of some nice cars to look at. So what have you seen in the classifieds this week?
Okay, here we go. First, from the Practical Classics Car and Restoration Show auction in March, Matt, you can finally live your dream and be the rebel without a clue in this replica Porsche Spider, 718 Spider. I had a quick look at the details, and it smells of VW Beetle, to be honest. It's a 1968 Porsche 718 Spider. Obviously, that's a Beetle that it was originally registered on, but it's quite nice, isn't it? Silver with a brown interior. And what caught my eye, £15,000 to £18,000.
That does look nice. I'm a sucker for a nice interior. It's got sort of quilted leather seats, brown leather seats, which look really good. When you say it's a Beetle underneath, does that mean it's going to sound like a Beetle, and go like a Beetle, like not very fast but quite loud?
Yeah, it's got a 1600 air-cooled engine, so that is going to be a Beetle. And when you have a quick look at it, it's quite nice. It's going to be very light, so it will go reasonably well, but it will sound four-cylindered and air-cooled. But it does have a big exhaust, so I don't know whether you'll be able to hear the engine over the roar of that. But I think that's quite nice. It's really cheap. You look a bit like James Dean before the crash, obviously, and I don't think that's that bad a car. They are a kit. It's got a certain value, but I think those are quite cheap. I think 2 or 3 years ago they were 30,000, 35,000.
Right, what else have we found classified-wise?
I think this is one for you. This is a 1974 Peugeot 504 Cabriolet. Now, the 504 is the classic African taxi that's still doing sterling duty in quite a few countries. But this is the cabriolet version of it from 1974. And what I think about this is it's ultra rare. It's got the Peugeot 504 mechanicals, so pretty simple again, but super rare. I mean, I haven't seen one of these in the flesh for decades.
Now, this is right up my strata, or as it's French, ma rue. 504 Cabriolet, metallic champagne, manual, double headlights on the front. It's got that sort of Fiat Spider-y kind of look to it. I really, really like these. I've seen there's a 304. It's the smaller one, isn't it? That cabriolet that's near where I live that comes to some of the classic car meets, which is gorgeous. But these are super rare. The problem with them is some of the parts. Apparently, the parts for these are an absolute nightmare. They're like the les poules de dents, which doesn't really translate as hen's teeth. But getting hold of bits of trim and stuff, unless you can find yourself the specialist parts supplier in Nantes who's in a barn or wherever he is, getting hold of those parts is a bit of a nightmare, which sort of would put you off a little bit. But it's very black vinyl inside, very 70s, but actually, that rear three-quarter looks good as well, doesn't it?
It does look good, although saying about the parts, I can just look at the gearbox gator that's coming apart. So I'm guessing you can't find one of those for love nor money. And you're right, it's a specialist car. So even though mechanically it's based on the 504, those panels are going to be made of unobtainium. So it does have a couple of problems. But the advantage of this is that where do you see another one? It's so rare. Certainly can't be many left. So I think that's a really good buy.
Moving on, and time for another quick trip down the British Leyland cul-de-sac, although this time there is a scintilla of good news before the inevitable failure, missed opportunity and sad collapse.
BL isn't always bad news, I'll have you know, and the rare bright spot of the British 1970s motoring is this, the Triumph Dolomite Sprint. Now, should we caress one of these or send it to the crusher in our tongue-twisting feature, Crush It or Caress It? Have you ever had one of these, Matt?
I've not, but I've had a lift in one. I remember, it's funny what you remember about cars. I've a couple of very vivid classic car memories. I'll be really quick with this. One is being about sort of 8 or 9 years old and sitting in a stag in someone's garage that were friends of my parents. And another one is getting picked up from swimming in a Dolomite Sprint. And my dad was really cautious about it. And he'd borrowed it from a friend because our car was in service or something. I couldn't get enough of it. It was just because it was one of those cars in the 70s, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had one in the early 90s for about 6 months because I sold it for a Peugeot 205 GTI 1.9 thinking the 205 would be better, and it wasn't. This Dolomite Sprint used to drive like nothing else I'd driven before. You could really bung them into a corner. If you leant on the brakes, got the weight on the front, stuck them into the corner, the front end was stuck, and then you basically hammered the accelerator down, the back end would dig in, and you'd get round this corner really quickly. I used to love this car. I thrashed it to death. It was one of the few cars I've had where the brakes were smoking after I'd finished driving it. I loved it. And I thought, well, if this is good, the 205 GTI, you know, I read car magazines and believed the hype. That's going to be brilliant. And actually, the Dolly was far better than that 205. And that was the handling benchmark at the time. I absolutely loved it and I really miss it. I regret selling it. Like most cars, you regret selling it. But this one, I really regret it because it's also really pretty as well. It's a Michelotti design. I mean, Giovanni Michelotti did most of the Triumph range, I think. Did the Herald, Spitfire, GT6, TR4s, 5s, Vitesse, Stag and this. I mean, pretty much everything. It looks great and it drove fantastically well.
Yeah, it's quite timely talking about this because I think values have shot up recently because take the Escort Mexico, for example, which was its rival. The values of that have gone nuts. So people are now starting to look at Dolly Sprints as an equivalent. And as you say, people are sort of remembering that actually they were pretty good, weren't they? Have we got any to look at? Let's start looking at some and kicking some tyres on some.
So this is probably the best one I could find. It's just £25,000 they're asking for it. It's a carmine red one, and it is absolutely beautiful. So it's red with a black vinyl roof and the kind of, what colour would you call that interior? I suppose if you were being unkind, it would be
brown.
Beige, but it's one of those BL
beige,
colours of the time that really looks quite cool. And this one is beautiful, and they just look so good. The stance is right. The interior was really cool. I mean, those central circular warning lights were so ahead of its time. It's a modern-looking car now, isn't it?
It is a good one, this one we're looking at. Carmine Red, as you say, the description says it can only be described as stunning and in perfect condition. That's always dangerous with a very old car. It'd be near impossible to find another Dolomite Sprint in even close to this condition. Wow, okay, so strong stuff, but a strong price as well, 26,000.
Yeah,
are they worth that?
I don't know, to be honest. I'm not quite sure. That seems to be the very top of the market. So if we go further down the market to where you and I feel a bit more comfortable, there's a 1977 Dolomite Sprint for sale here, which is in Inca Yellow, and that's 14,950. Now that to me feels a bit more where you want your Sprint to be. It's just a bit cheaper. You get to use it a bit. And that yellow colour was fantastic. I think Mimosa Yellow was one of their launch colours, but this is Inca Yellow. It just stands out, doesn't it? That looks tremendous. Vinyl roof, that looks like a dark blue interior. It's got the fantastic Leyland symbol on the pedals that I love so much. I think that's a really good car.
It's presented really nicely, actually. That looks like it's been almost detailed, doesn't it?
And it's one of those cars that looks like it's going fast, even when it's stationary. I think that might be down to that cam tail design. Now, if you remember, the Alpha Spider went from the Duetto, the boat tail Spider, to the cam tail. And this was quite popular in the 70s, this look, where you just basically cut the body off at the end. But that looks really cool, the cam tail. And this yellow one's got some great, it looks like an aftermarket sports exhaust. So sounds good, goes well, looks great.
It's cool, isn't it?
Yeah, that's giving me the feeling. I feel I need to go and test drive one of these, because if it's anything like as good as I remember it was, then it would be a very good car. And I think in the right colour scheme, people get these things now. People get the kind of run-of-the-mill cars that had special versions of them. And if you look at all the Sierras that had the kind of special XR4Is and stuff, and the Sierra Cosworths, people do appreciate them now. And I think this is its time.
So what are we deciding? I think it's kind of already decided, isn't it? Crushing it or caressing it? I think we've got to caress it. That's for me and a caress. What about you?
Oh, God, it's definitely a caress. I would absolutely love to have that on my drive and just sit and look at it. You'd wash it, polish it, look at it, and then drive it on a deserted road on Sunday evening. I think that is a really good car. I want it.
Okay, so from tin tops to rag tops, and the sun may not have been shining much recently, but the law of averages says it must do at least some point this year, even if it's only for about half an hour.
But that's enough time to drop the top on your roadster so everyone can hear you listening to the Lighthouse family. But until that sun-baked moment arrives, there's time to scour the classifieds for the perfect convertible.
So let's kick off this with a rare bit of logical thinking. Shall we, Max, limit ourselves to, 20,000, and let's do like 3 each? Does that sound fair?
Yeah, let's rattle through these. 20,000 is about right for a summer convertible. And go on, you go first, because this is definitely one of yours.
Okay, yeah. Without doubt, you say drop top summer convertible, you've got to have an Alfa Romeo Spider. This one is a 1990 Spider, so that's a Series 4, which is the last of the sort of 60s-looking cars. This one actually is probably one of the best ones to go for, because it had power steering on this one, and it had something else as well that I forget. She's bloody useless. This is why you do the stats and not me. I had the one before this which didn't have power steering, and it was a bit of a nightmare because it's a heavy old car. This one, though, is in black, 17,995, 18,000. I bought and sold mine for $5,000 back in the 90s. They are good cars, these. If you want that Alpha Spider experience, that's a good one. Do you like that, Max?
Yeah, I really like it. Also, being 1990, it's gone kind of post-spoilers, and it's more the clean-cut look. It's got the kind of Series 4 design camtail, which is nice. It's got the pepper pot alloys, are they called? They used to be called pepper pots on Jags. And also, I noticed the dealer's got a load of Ford Transits. So this obviously isn't his usual fare. So I reckon he'll want that off his hands pretty quickly. I think, maybe 15, 16 grand, that's a really good car.
Yeah, it's the thing that these had that the 80s ones didn't have. The 80s, they have power steering, and they didn't have the crap body kit that the 80s ones had, which are awful black rubber things. So that's a Spider. For me, it's possibly the wrong colour. You do want a red Spider, I think, or a white Spider. I would shop around, potentially get a red one, but an Alpha Spider, great drop top for the summer. What you got?
I am going to a little bit more modern. And I know you think that classic cars stopped in about 1969. You're wrong, because here's a Lotus Elise Series 1 Roadster. So this is a 1999 Series 1 Lotus Elise. Now, I think these are future classics. Now, you say that about loads of cars, and I say that about hundreds of cars. But the Lotus Elise Series 1 was groundbreaking. It was quick, it handled beautifully, and a lot of them have been crashed since, or the engines they had that head gasket failure. So I think the Series 1 Elise is really good value. This one's at 18,500, 59,000 miles, blue, 118 brake horsepower. So that is the Rover K-Series engine. So it has a few reliability issues, but once those are sorted, it's a great engine. It's nice and quick, it's nice and light, and the whole car is pretty light. I think for a summer roadster, that's a corker.
What's the roof situation on these?
I think if you want to break all your fingers, you can put a roof on it. It's a quite fiddly roof, but do you just leave the roof off for the British summer and get rained on? I would be tempted to use it like a kind of motorbike and just take it out when it's sunny and drive back quickly to the garage as soon as it starts raining.
Okay, let's move on then. Let's talk about this. If you need a little bit more space, Mercedes E-Class 3.2 E320 Cabriolet from 1995. We're looking at about 11,000 on this one. Why are we recommending this?
Well, this is the one that's based on the W124 Mercedes, which is the famous estate that was so bulletproof. That was the last really well-built Mercedes. And even though they're slightly ugly, it's a kind of saloon car with two doors and a bit chopped off at the back. And it's not the most resolved convertible. You do get the 3.2 litre Mercedes engine in one of the most reliable cars that was ever made. So for £10,000, it's a drop top. You can get some people in the back. It looks cool, great colour, 135,000 miles. They're good cars, these, and where they're not the prettiest and people might go, wow, as you drive past, it's a really good, reliable convertible for just pootling around in the summer.
Not so sure. I like Mercedes. I like old Mercedes. This one, I think, is a bit of an ugly duckling. It's one of those 90s, mid-90s cars where all the bumpers and the taillights and I don't know, just it's a bit... I don't think the lines are great. I think the cars that came after it are better, but they're not quite classic-y enough. I might swerve on that. It's 11,000. So it's not too bad for a car of that era, but nah, it doesn't do it for me. What else we got?
So take a deep intake of breath, because I'm breaking my own rule here, and that is suggesting a Jaguar XJS V12. Now, V12s are great engines if you can keep on top of them, because if you don't keep on top of them, they're very expensive. But for £18,000, an XJS in blue, a convertible with a blue hood, with a light, what's that colour? I suppose that's very light beige. I think these XJSs, again, they're quite a lot of car for the money. They do have the most amazing ability to go wrong and cost you a fortune. But let's just pretend that it didn't go wrong just for 5 minutes. For those 5 minutes, you would be having a fantastic time in that. You might look a bit Lady Di at the races, but they're a great car to drive, and it is a great engine when it's working.
I remember looking at an XJS at a classic car dealer's a couple of years ago, and I lifted the bonnet on and I went, oh, shit. I put it back down again, because if you're not used to seeing what's under a bonnet, I mean, let alone a V12, but if you pop any XJS bonnet up, you will see a lot of pipework and a lot of stuff.
You know when people, when they're dieting, put pictures of themselves fat on a fridge? Well, if you look at picture 13 there of the engine bay, just put that on your fridge, because that will stop you buying any XJS V12. The complexity of that thing is just unbelievable.
I'm trying to find the picture. Oh my God, yes, that's the horror that I saw before, I think. Just scary. I mean, most old cars, you pop the bonnet up and you can see the lump, can't you? And then you can see the bits you recognised. It's like a sort of game of operation. This, it's like somebody's done an engine and then had some more ideas afterwards.
And you know what's even worse? I think that one may have aircon compressor added to the utter chaos of that engine bay. So even though I'm suggesting it for somebody else like you to buy, because I ain't going to go anywhere near that.
So I thought this section was about classic roadsters. Max has picked some sort of random stuff from the 90s. This is more up my street. 1971 Triumph TR6, about 20,000 in blue. Steel wheels, it's going to sound good. You know that before you've even looked at it. What do you think, Max? Did TR6 do it for you?
I do like TR6s. You know, I've been blinded for years by my love of the TR7, but actually I saw a couple of TR6s last week, and they are a really nice resolved design, back to that Giovanni Michelotti that we were talking about earlier with the Dolomite Sprints. So I do like these. I always thought that the fuel injection was quite problematic, but I'm guessing that's been sorted now. But when you get the roof down, you get that flat deck look, almost like the Pagoda SL Mercedes. That's actually really nice look, isn't it?
When you hear one, you do turn around, and usually it is a TR6. It's got a distinctive sound to it, and I think that soundtrack, that design, that era of car, chrome bumpers, that ticks the box for me. This one's got quite chunky wheels on for some reason. I don't think they're the original ones, or they just look a bit offset or something strange going on.
It doesn't look quite right, does it? I think it's riding quite high at the back, but maybe it's got some extra suspension. And also I think it's overtired, in that a car of that age doesn't need really wide tyres because you want to feel it move around a bit. But TR6s, yeah, they're really nice. I quite like that.
If we're talking sort of drop top and summary stuff, I suppose the ultimate thing's got to be a Porsche. Have you got one for us?
I am going to suggest this because I think we've talked in previous episodes about cars with pop-up headlights, which are cool, tick, and we've talked about MGBs, which are cool at the kind of like £12,000 to £15,000 price range. Now, I've got something which has got both of those, pop-up headlights and MGB pricing. It's the Porsche 944, the 3-litre Series 2. Now, here's one which is in bright red with a kind of white leather interior, £15,000. Now, I think these 944s, again, I've been saying this on numerous cars and I've been proved wrong, this is the next classic. I said that about the Lotus Elise, but I think the 944s are quite underappreciated because they're really nice driving cars. They're relatively simple. There's quite a few of them around. The clubs are great. And I do think it looks nice. A 944 convertible is in really nice shape. What do you think?
I do. You know my knowledge of Porsches isn't great. Is this the one you snobs call the Volkswagen Porsche, or is that the other one?
That's the 924 that had the slightly more Volkswagen-based engine. But this is a 4-cylinder, so it's not the kind of, 911 snobs say everything has to have the 6-cylinder air-cooled, and this isn't. This is a 4-cylinder engine. But it's a really nice one.
It's dated really well, and it looks really interesting. You don't see many of these around. I think that's probably the pick of the lot for me.
Oh, right. I thought you'd be the TR6 man, to be honest. I didn't think you'd go for this.
I can't get in a TR6. It's another car that I can't get in because the seat doesn't go back far enough. But I think this Porsche is quite interesting. And for 90s car, yes, it's got colour-coded bumpers and everything, but it just has the lines, doesn't it? I think that's a really interesting thing. What's this up for again?
15,990. Not bad, is it? Cheaper than the XJS. Cheaper to run because the parts aren't too bad. It doesn't use up so much fuel. Yeah, I think 944s are really good, actually. I think maybe this is their time. People have said that for the last 10 years, that now is the time for the 944, but maybe now is the time for the 944. And this is, particularly in convertible guys, a really great summer buy.
Yeah, I really like that. It's definitely worth checking out. And it's got a nice rear end, which brings us on to our next feature. Yeah,
exactly. So here's a safe space where we can talk about rear ends without getting a slap in the face.
What is your favourite car backside? Not a question you hear very often, but what rear ends do you really like to follow?
Well, we talked earlier about the Alfa Spider, and I think, to be honest, that's one of the few cars that's had two really good rear ends. You had first the boat-tail Duetto, which was really shapely. Then you had that Camtail Series 2, which was just cut off. Both look equally as good as each other. I like both of those. I think the Alfa Spider, probably the rear end of those on any model, is pretty good.
Yes, I mean, Alfas generally look good from the back three quarters anyway, but I think the Camtail is the sweet spot on that, as we've talked about before. What else comes to mind? Aston Martins?
Yeah, Aston Martin Vantage, I quite like that. Any DB9 looks good from the back. I also think I was overtaken by this a while back, and it was one of those experiences where you look at it and go, wow. It was a Ferrari 458. Now, they've got 3 exhausts in the centre. It's a V8, so I don't know why you'd have 3 exhausts. And then just 2 round taillights that do everything. And it's a nice wide car. It looked vaguely kind of Ferrari F40, F50. I think the Ferrari 458 is a real corker from the back. What do you think?
Oh, okay. Yes, there's sort of 2 pointy round lights at the back. Is that what we're talking about?
Be a bit more enthusiastic, please.
looks like a lot of the other ones.
Oh my God, no, it doesn't.
Yeah,
I mean, this rear end is styled.
Can I cast you back? I'm just going to flip-flop some extra ones in here for you. Triumph Stag rear end.
Oh, yeah.
Because you've got the chrome oval, which is the same as front and back, and then you've got the tail lights, which are nice. But then you've got usually the double exhausts as well. And they're usually sticking out quite a way. It's got a mean, aggressive backside.
Yeah, those Stag designs at the back are really nice, aren't they? I always think the Stag looks good because it's got that really thin boot lid. So the boot lid is just completely one piece of metal, which is totally flat. And if you lift that up and put it down, it's just one flat piece of metal. There's no kind of edges to it. That's a really bit of a cool design there. And I think all of those Triumphs of that era had a similar kind of camtail design, and that makes it look really nice. Now, here's another one that I've been thinking of. What about, and you might have to Google this one, the Buick Riviera?
Yeah, I'm going to have to do that because I think I know it. Let's have a look.
It's quite similar to a Corvette C2. It's got that fastback shape with a split window, and I think the Buick Riviera has got to be one of the best looking cars from the back. From the front, it's a bit confused, but as a rear profile, the Riviera is great.
Hold on a minute. I'm not sure about this one because from the back it looks like it should be the front. A windscreen in the middle, and then a pointy bit that goes to the front where the badge is, and then a couple of lights. It looks like they've designed the car the wrong way around.
Yeah, maybe they started from the back, and that's why the back's so good and the front's a bit off. But like the Corvette C2, I think that split rear window, the fastback shape is nice. And again, here's another kind of fastback suggestion: is the Ford Mustang fastback. go back to the Steve McQueen Bullet car, I think that's a really good rear end.
You've gone very American on this again. I'm going to bring you back to Britain because I'm going to put a vote in for my backside. This is one of the reasons I bought my car, Sunbeam Alpine. I think it's a really, really good back three quarters. It's a little bit Aston Martin-y.
I've always liked the Alpine, to be honest. I think it's quite underrated. I do feel you're about to put yours up for sale all the time because you're selling it so hard. I feel like I'm in a showroom now with very expensive coffee and saying, what can I do to get you in the Sunbeam Alpine today, sir? But yeah, that is a great design. But again, that's an American design. I wouldn't say that's a British design. That's stolen from America. That's why I'm talking about American cars, because in the 50s and 60s, those American rears were outrageous.
This is very true. What about in the 80s? Is there anything in the 80s, sort of, what are we thinking, Fords, XR3Is? No. Alpha Sud? Bit forgettable, wasn't it, in terms of like a rear end?
Allegro.
What about Volvo? What about an Amazon or a Volvo like that? Have you got anything you can offer us?
I think the Volvo Amazon Estate was a very good-looking car. And I do think, and this is a bit of I don't know whether you're going to go for this or not, but this is a Volvo, and it's quite a rare model. It's a 1950s one. This one on the screen now is a 1954 Volvo PV444. So it looks a little bit like a cockroach, to be honest. It's got four big...
It does.
You know what I mean? It's kind of curved at the back. It's got four big wings. But I think that's quite a distinctive back, isn't it? I haven't seen anything like that since. And I do think that's quite a different looking car. I wouldn't say it's nice, but it certainly stands out.
So should we wrap this up by saying, in absence of any better evidence, should we go for the Stag?
The Stag, and I'm going to throw one in, is the Mark I Lotus Cortina, which had the rear lights that ended up on the Ford GT40. Now that's quite a cool rear end. It's got a hint of America. It went to the GT40, those lights. I like the Lotus Cortina. But yeah, it's one of those discussions that could go around in circles. But I think my suggestions have been better than yours.
The difference is you look stuff up before we start talking, whereas I look it up while we're talking. If you've got a better suggestion for a rear end of a car that you think is classic that we've missed, please do let us know. We can talk more on the next episode about it.
So that's about it for this week. If you want to get in touch, try our Instagram page. You'll find us at the Tyre Kickers UK. It's an orange logo with an old Porsche on it, and I've just put on some photos of my 912 with new headlights. If that doesn't make you rush to the site, I don't know what will.
It's going to go viral. You'll find all the links to listen to the show on your favourite podcast service like Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, and click subscribe while you're there, please, as well, and you'll get updated when we stick up a new episode. Or if you're like us and you can't be bothered with all that, just go to Instagram, click on the link in the bio, and then the option that says listen right now. It does exactly what it says on the tin.
So until next time, keep looking, keep dreaming, keep driving, and keep tyre kicking. See you next time.
I did what I said I wasn't going to do, which was waffle. Sorry.
A kind of... No, sorry, I went off on one as soon as you mentioned
God. Bloody hell, he's ad-libbing. I don't know, there's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
You know, they're not getting any younger, and there's no more produced. Sorry, I'm talking rubbish now.
The logo on the...
Every outword of mine is, yeah, I really like it, let's buy it. So I'm going to start disliking something soon, I think.